As you've probably seen, pro-Palestine protests on college campuses here in the States are reaching a fever pitch. There were 150 arrests at NYU last night, with videos of students and faculty being zip-tied by police going viral, with dozens more arrested at Yale and Columbia University, which has arguably become the epicenter of this flashpoint, with the NYPD conducting the largest mass arrest the school has seen since 1968, which is back when hundreds were arrested for protesting the Vietnam War. And all this playing out as yesterday morning, the school also announced that it was moving to remote classes for the entire week, with them then taking it a step further last night, moving all classes to a hybrid model for the rest of the semester, with school officials citing safety concerns as the reason for that decision. They also punished a number of students, including by suspending some. We've also seen photos going viral of alleys absolutely stacked with what people claim to be belongings from their rooms. All of this really began last week when students at Columbia set up an encampment in the middle of campus to demand that the university divest itself from Israeli ties, with some students also saying they'd faced anti-Palestinian harassment and even death threats. But the timing of all that scene is notable because it happened just as Columbia University President Manoush Shafik spoke to Congress last week about anti-Semitism on college campuses, which we covered on the show, and just a day after that, police were called to break up the new tent city, with the university saying they hadn't asked for authorization to hold the protest, which is required under new university rules that the university put in place after months of October 7th related protests. Additionally, they were chanting the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which, as we've covered in the past, has been a very controversial point, with one side saying it's anti-Semitic, another side saying it's not. Congress, of course, does think that it's anti-Semitic, and Shafik promised that she'd crack down on anti-Semitism. And in the end, on Thursday, 108 people were arrested and told to get off the campus. But that also barely lasted, because on Friday, another tent encampment was erected, and as of recording, it's still active. But also, as everything's been playing out, we've also seen videos of blatant anti-Semitism from the campus going viral online, right? People seeing Jewish students being screamed at. There was also another video that went viral from just outside the campus with someone telling Jewish students,
"Never forget the 7th of October! That will happen! Never forget the 7th of October! Not 1 more time! Not 5 more times! Not 10 more times! Not 100 more times! Not 1,000 more times! Not 10,000 times!"
And so videos like that have led to widespread criticism for the protests and fear among Jewish students and faculty. You also had Rabbi Eli Buchler, who's with a major Orthodox Jewish union at the campus, telling students to stay away as their safety couldn't be guaranteed, although the organization itself said that students shouldn't be forced to leave and instead the school needs to do more. You also had Representative Virginia Fox, the Republican chair of the House Education Committee, warning Columbia that its, quote, "continued failure to restore order and safety promptly to campus constitutes a major breach of the university's Title VI obligations, upon which federal financial assistance is contingent and which must immediately be rectified," which, if Shafik had largely skirted criticism for her responses in Congress on Thursday, that is definitely no longer the case, with some lawmakers now calling for her resignation. We've also seen the situation get the attention of the White House, with President Biden noting that this comes as the major Jewish holiday of Passover started yesterday, and with that saying silence is complicity. Even in recent days, we've seen harassment and calls for violence against Jews. This blatant anti-Semitism is reprehensible and dangerous, and it has absolutely no place on college campuses or anywhere in our country, with them then going on to say, "My administration will continue to speak out and aggressively implement the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, putting the full force of the federal government behind protecting the Jewish community." And this morning, we also saw former President Trump outside the courtroom of his trial framing the protesters as, quote, "very radical people wanting to rip the colleges down," with them also taking the opportunity to take several swipes at Biden and trying to pin what's happening on him.
What's going on at the college level and the colleges, Columbia, NYU, and others, is a disgrace. And it's really on Biden. And I can tell you, he's no friend of Israel, that's for sure. And he's no friend of the Arab world either.
However, with all this, we've also seen protesters pushing back against the claims of anti-Semitism, with one of the defenses being that there's a clear distinction between those who are a part of the official encampment and those coming to the campus to cause trouble, or with even Columbia saying that many non-students were coming to the school, and others pointing that many of the pro-Palestinian protesters are actually Jewish students themselves, with many openly celebrating Shabbat at the protest with no issues, and one student organization even posting on Instagram, "We firmly reject any form of hate or bigotry and stand vigilant against non-students attempting to disrupt the solidarity being forged among students, Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, Jewish, Black, and pro-Palestinian classmates and colleagues who represent the full diversity of our country." And actually with that, we've seen the likes of streamer and political commentator Hassan Piker talking yesterday to two protesters from that organization, with them emphasizing that statement, giving a virtual tour around the encampment, and one saying,
"So the front gate, we have our proud and beautiful Jewish Voice for Peace students who have volunteered to help with security, keep the community safe from anti-Semitic attacks by the Zionists against our anti-Zionists and against Islamophobic attacks."
Apparently there was like some kind of like anti-Semitic sign that snuck through or something, and then everyone was pointing to it to be like, this entire protest is actually anti-Semitic. Like people hyperventilating about this sort of shit when the obvious protests are about Israel's actions in Gaza and divesting and making sure that the Columbia University divests from the genocide that Israel is conducting in Gaza.
And all of that culminating yesterday when hundreds of faculty members staged a mass walkout in protest of the student arrests, with many criticizing Shafiq for calling the NYPD and what they argued were nonviolent protesters, a lecturer at the law school saying it didn't seem like any kind of measures were taken to de-escalate, though Shafiq did announce yesterday that she's bringing school leaders together to try to find a solution to what she described as this crisis. And adding, I know that there is much debate about whether or not we should use the police on campus, and I am happy to engage in those discussions. But I do know that better adherence to our rules and effective enforcement mechanisms would obviate the need for relying on anyone else to keep our community safe. We're gonna have to wait to see what happens from here if Columbia tries to remove the 10 encampments again and if it'll lead to more protests, especially because with the nature of these protests, it feels like putting one down leads to 2 more cropping up at other campuses. Right? For example, UC Berkeley established their own encampment yesterday. Cal Poly Humboldt has also now shut down classes through Wednesday after protesters barricaded themselves inside of a building. 9 more arrested just this morning at the University of Minnesota after forming an encampment. And then you even had protesters marching on NYPD headquarters last night after the mass arrests at NYU. But as we watch the situation grow and develop, I gotta ask you, what are your thoughts on all this?